want to. Good evening and welcome to this evening's candidate forum where we will hear from the Democratic candidates for the Public Service Commission seat. My name is Namadi Henry and I am a member of the Gwinnett County NAACP Political Action Committee. And next we will have Ellie Walker, our chair for the Political Action Committee with the Gwinnett NAACP.
Good evening, everyone. I am Ellie Walker. I am the PAC chair for the Gwinnett NAACP. Thank you, Nye. So tonight we are going to have our Meet the Candidate forum. And as we go through this forum tonight, please reference the banner that you'll see at the bottom of the screen to see what various upcoming events that we will be hosting as a chapter. We have a lot of things coming up this summer and into the fall that lead to our Freedom Fund banquet. We also have AXO going on. So, please reference that. You can also go to any of our social pages and our website, GwinnettNAACP.com and search under events to see what we have going on. As an organization, we're committed to civic engagement, equity, and informed voting across Georgia. So tonight, we are excited to provide this platform for voters to hear directly from these candidates seeking to represent District 3 on Georgia's Public Service Commission. And part of that Public Service Commission's responsibility is to oversee our utilities and energy policy, broadband expansion, and consumer protection for all of Georgia. So like Nye said, we have 4 Democratic candidates tonight representing District 3. We have Mr. Daniel Blackman, Ms. Keisha Waits, Mr. Robert Jones, and Mr. Peter Hubbard joining us tonight. The way this will go is each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond per question. And then we'll do, 90 seconds to 2 minutes for both opening and closing statements. And then we'll rotate answers to ensure that there's fairness throughout the forum and each candidate gets a chance to respond at the beginning of each question. So before we get started, please note this is a nonpartisan educational event. We are a nonpartisan organization. So just remember that each candidate, that represents their views of how they are coming into the space. But as an organization, we believe in just making sure everybody has the most informed stance in order to cast their ballot. So we are nonpartisan, and this is a nonpartisan event. We ask that that everybody remain muted throughout the program. If there's any technical difficulties, you can message us. And then we will be monitoring the chat throughout the event. So if you have questions from the audience, please feel free to drop your question. And about halfway through, we will make sure we get those highlighted so the candidates can answer your question. All right, so we're going to start with opening statements. Candidates, you will have about 90 seconds to 2 minutes to introduce yourselves. And Ms. Waits, we will start with you, and then we will go to Mr. Hubbard, Mr. Jones, and then Mr. Blackman will wrap us up. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, and thank you to the host for putting together this conversation tonight. Like many of you, I've received one of those exorbitant bills, and so I think it's important that we have individuals who have existing relationships and legislative and policy experience to navigate this particular waters. I come to you as someone that spent 3 terms in the Georgia General Assembly. After that, I had the privilege of serving on the Atlanta City Council. I worked with the federal government for a period of 15 years, where I was on the road with FEMA, helping families who had survived natural disasters throughout the United States of America. Here in Georgia, we know that deregulation did not serve our fellow community. And so it's my belief that representation really matters. This election, I believe, will be one of the most important elections that we will see this cycle, including the next cycle. And I hope to be a part of the solution and to be a part of the conversation in terms of moving us forward.
Thank you. Mr. Hubbard.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Peter Hubbard, and just a quick background. I went to school at the University of Memphis, studied math and physics. Then I went to Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore and studied economics. And then the next 15 years basically did everything I could to understand everything about energy. And I did a lot of electricity utility planning, integrated resource plans is what I did. And now for the last few years, I've been developing solar and battery storage projects in places like Texas to bring more clean energy onto the grid. So I'm deep into energy. And the most important thing I think you should know about me, besides the fact that, I've been living in Atlanta for the last 10 years. So, I've been a resident there for some time, is that I, 6 years ago, in 2019, formed the nonprofit Georgia Center for Energy Solutions, the Georgia Center for Energy Solutions. And I've been advocating for clean energy before the Public Service Commission, doing this work that I'm asking you to vote for me on for 6 years already, the full term of a commissioner. So I'd ask that you listen to my thoughtful responses and my energy expertise and take that into account when thinking about your vote. So thank you.
You're up, Mr. Jones.
All right. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to join this session tonight. I'm not sure if you can see the private chat or not. I put in the address for my website. It's Robert Jones, the number 4, PSC.com. If you go take a look at it, you'll see all the amazing, incredible things I've done in my life and why you should consider me as a candidate for the Georgia Public Service Commission. But seriously, on my website, you'll kind of see this corny marketing message around somebody from the inside working on your side. And that really kind of captures my background in terms of having worked at a public utilities commission in California, regulating energy, telecommunications, deregulating telecommunications. I had a great career in the telecommunications sector, worked my way up to a senior vice president of network engineering and construction, and then moved over to Microsoft, where I spent 8 years moving customers into the data centers. So I think all of my background is particularly relevant at this point in time in terms of the issues that are in front of the commission, that are in front of Georgia. I got interested in this race because after looking at the commission, I felt, in fact, we're being underserved. And with my background and expertise, I could actually add some value that would raise the performance of the commission and deliver opportunity. I look forward to your questions.
And Mr. Blackman.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say thank you and good evening, and thank you all for hosting the forum. My name is Daniel Blackman, former Democratic nominee for the Public Service Commission in Georgia. After running for the Public Service Commission, I was appointed by President Biden to run the Environmental Protection Agency in Region 4, which encompasses the state of Georgia and 7 other states, including 7 federally recognized tribes. So over the last decade, I've not only worked on the policy side of the regulatory process in Georgia and around energy issues in both the Obama administration and the Biden administration. Starting with Obama, I worked on the Clean Power Plan. I worked on helping on the initial conversations with the Paris Accords, which was globally to help remove the United States, reduce the amount of emissions in our country. And while I was serving under the Biden administration, I started as the regional administrator, deploying over $4.5 billion in capital across the region. And then I later worked as senior advisor for STEM. And in that capacity, I worked to strengthen the federal workforce, which the current administration is currently depleting. That includes science-related jobs, but it also has a tremendous impact on how the regulatory process in the state of Georgia is going to move forward, because I helped to implement the largest federal investment around climate, infrastructure, and also lowering the burden on many rural families, especially those who lack access to broadband in areas that I'm very familiar with, such as coastal Georgia, North Georgia, Middle Georgia, and obviously the Metro Atlanta region. So thank you, and I look forward to the conversation.
There you have it. Those are your candidates for District 3. Thank you all for those introductions. We are now going to move into the meat of tonight's program, the Q&A portion. So each candidate will have about 2 minutes to respond to each question. And again, I will rotate the order so each of you has a chance to go first. So let's begin. We're going to start with Mr. Blackman again, followed by Mr. Jones, Mr. Hubbard, and then Ms. Waits. First question is foundational. How do you define the role of a public service commissioner, and why are you the best person to serve in this capacity for District 3? Mr. Blackman?
So the role of a public service commissioner should be, at the very least, not only to help regulate utilities in the state of Georgia, but it should be to explore energy and renewable options across the board. It looks at infrastructure, protecting working families in areas that are overwhelmingly burdened with energy costs that are rising and have risen not only over the past decade, but with projects that are established. What many people don't realize is that when they go into their homes and they cut on a light switch or they look to charge their phones, they don't realize that there's a 5-member commission that determines how much we pay on those types of everyday practices we make. It is a pocketbook issue race. These individuals are tasked to make sure that when a utility company brings before them any type of plan, whether it's infrastructure related or it is to explore energy options, they are to take that specific role and determine how our rates would be set. Whether you have Georgia Power or an EMC, you have skin in the game. And that's because many projects overwhelmingly impact many of those individuals, including senior citizens on a fixed income, working families, single moms, and individuals that just really have high utility bills. My belief as being the strongest candidate for this commission race is not only have I been doing work at the commission for over a decade, but I also was a Democratic nominee for the Public Service Commission and made the runoff. I'm very familiar with this state. I've traveled all over the state. And I think that will show as this conversation continues to persist, but also in my role with a federal background and also statewide on the policy end, I believe the federal role that I've played in regulating many of these industries and working especially with data centers and on environmental justice, deployment of federal capital, including infrastructure, poises me and puts me in a position to be the most qualified for this race. And I look forward to the rest of the conversation. Thank you.
Mr. Jones.
Sure. So every business in America faces some form of regulation. Most of them generally are safety regulation. You think about food safety. You think about medical regulation to make sure vaccines are improved. What makes the Public Service Commission unique, it's a regulatory agency that regulates prices and profits of a monopoly. And it's a very specialized function because most businesses operate in a competitive environment. And so the marketplace sets the prices and the profits based on the quality of the product. With a monopoly, they don't have a competition. They don't have a competitor. And left to their own devices, they will run wild. They will lead to higher costs. They'll lead to higher prices, which lead to higher profits. So the whole role of the Regulatory Commission is to be a proxy for a competitive market. It's to go in and scrutinize the cost of the utility to make sure they're trying to be as cost efficient as possible. So in fact, they are facing cost pressures and price pressures so we as consumers get good value. The problem we're having today is that's not occurring. You've got a Public Service Commission that has become quite cozy with a powerful monopoly, and so we're being underserved. So this whole campaign is about really having the Regulatory Commission perform its fundamental function, which is to scrutinize monopoly deeply, drive it to be as cost efficient as possible to deliver the value that we need as consumers and not be the financial backstop the way they're treating us today. Thank you.
Mr. Hubbard.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. So the role of a public service commissioner is to serve the public. Right now we have 5 Republicans who are corporate service commissioners. They serve the monopoly corporate interest of Georgia Power Company. And that's why your bills are skyrocketing by $60 a month in the summer. Summer's coming up for the average household. So they're not regulating, and the result is that we're seeing these bill increases. And there's a number of ways that I'll just give you an example. It was a week or two ago now that the commissioners and the Governor Kemp froze rates, right? And they touted that as a big deal for the state of Georgia. The reason why I'm the right choice for this is because I've been doing this work in front of the commission, and I see all the different ways that they manipulate the system. And this rate freeze is one of these examples. There's so many loopholes. You could drive a Mack truck through it. Your bills can still go up. And this is their freezing rates after they've already risen them, jacked them up by $60 a month, as I said. So I am the watchdog for this role because I've been in front of the commission and I see all the tricks of the trade, and I could list literally 100 of them. And we need someone who can dig into these details, the weeds, and see how the power company is manipulating us and how our commissioners are failing to regulate that.
Ms. Waits.
Thank you. Representation matters. Deregulation did not serve Georgians. We've already talked about the role of the PSC, but more importantly, there is a reason why each of us have no idea what they do, and that's by design. Essentially, as we've talked about many times, the PSC should be a watchdog for consumers, meaning watching and looking out for each of us as consumers. However, with the 6 rate hikes that we've had in the last 2 years, we have not been, looked out for as consumers. Key responsibilities that we should have from the PSC: energy policy oversight, consumer advocacy and protection, grid reliability, that is utilizing innovative ways to ensure our grid reliability so that we're not out of power like Puerto Rico. And then lastly, to be effective, communicating with the public, letting you know what we are doing. The way that we do that is through community engagement. We do that through public town hall meetings. We do that through partnerships and utilizing incentives so that people will know what we do on a daily basis. Why am I the best candidate? Because I have a long history of standing up for fellow Georgians. I'm not a Johnny come lately. I have a history of speaking up when there are tough issues in the state of Georgia. I did that during the 3 terms that I served on the Georgia General Assembly, in addition to the time that I served as an Atlanta City Council member. So I submit to you that having some level of experience in terms of legislative policy experience will matter. I am not an expert on energy policy, but when it comes to taking on bullies, I know a little something about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Now let's talk about affordability, something that's really top of mind for all of us on this call. What will you do to ensure utility rates remain affordable for low income and working class families across Georgia? Again, we'll start with Mr. Blackman and continue after that.
Sorry about that. I was trying to get unmuted. So first and foremost, we need to be very clear about this election. We need to ensure that people understand that when I'm elected, it's not just about getting one individual on the Public Service Commission. It is about ensuring that we work not only with this race, but there's another race in District 2, Dr. Alicia Johnson. We need to ensure that we ultimately work to build out a competitive list of candidates that will continue to build this infrastructure, including 2 more that can help us have a majority vote at the Public Service Commission. Now, as it relates to affordability, Georgia absolutely has been impacted by in many impoverished and marginalized communities. There are 11.6 million people in Georgia. Over 2 million people in Georgia live at or below the poverty line. Many individuals in rural Georgia and in coastal Georgia, in areas like Dougherty County, where Albany is, these areas are seeing their rent as high as their utility bills, and that's a problem. So the things that we have to do include education. It starts with forums like this and also expands into our ability to build coalitions. I have coalitions all over the state of Georgia with individuals for as far north as Raven County, all the way down to Valdosta. I grew up in Columbus, Georgia. I understand how relationships in this state, not only at the state legislature, but with the private sector works to encourage innovation and ideas, many of which I had to take on during my role as a regional administrator, because I had 6 of the 8 states in my region were all run by Republicans. They were all conservative states. We have to understand, number 1, how to navigate as a public service commissioner. Number 2, how to work with the industries in which we are regulating without taking money from these industries. And number 3, we've got to build the capacity to ensure that alternative forms of energy, such as rooftop solar and community solar, are entered in and argued for so that communities have a fair chance to have lower and affordable bills.
So earlier, Mr. Hubbard mentioned the announcement that came out, I think it was last week, about freezing rates. And to me, that was a huge miss because Georgia Power and the Southern Company had gone on record that they wanted to be putting downward pressure on prices. And so to me, a rate freeze is not downward pressure. And so the commission walked away from its responsibility to go in and do a deep dive in terms of the financials to see if in fact we could put downward pressure on rates. The second area I would focus on really is the way rates are set is you basically divide the costs between residential consumers, businesses, and industry or manufacturers. Given the amount of energy generation that's going to take place over the next 5 years and what it means in terms of Georgia from a burden standpoint, I would see more of the costs being shifted over to industry, over to data centers that should provide some relief over on the residential side. So that'd be a second area I'm looking at. The third is when you look at the financial assistance of programs that are available for energy assistance based on essentially if you are 2 times above the poverty level, which I think is about $24,000, $26,000 a year. If in fact price increases are going to be going up, we need to be raising the level by which energy assistance happens as well. You can't have a 43% increase in rates and still keep the assistance levels at twice the poverty level. So there has to be some type of automatic mechanism that makes more people available to move into those assistance programs. The last is it looks like only 70% of those that are eligible to take the assistance programs are actually participating. And so as a commission, as a community, we need to get to 90, 95, 100% of the people that have an opportunity to take advantage of energy assistance and energy bill relief, are making sure they take full advantage of that. So those are thoughts I have in terms of if I was sitting on the commission, I'd be pressing on in terms of how we go ahead and provide some affordability and relief from those who are pressured from these high prices.
So let me tackle this question about affordability. And this is a deadly serious subject, but I want to channel Jimmy McMillan. And my campaign is basically premised on the power bills are too damn high. And as a commissioner, what I can do about that is you're a constitutional officer of the state of Georgia. You have the authority to propose alternative rate structures for those who can't afford these skyrocketing power bills. You have the ability to do a lot of things as a commissioner. And what I see in my work as a clean energy advocate is there is a lot of grift and fat, and there's the ability to reduce rates for those who are can't afford them, and those costs can be borne by, for example, new customers that are coming to the state, but also just the existing capacity on the system. We're not using our system efficiently. And so I see that, and I see how we can reduce rates using what we have better rather than building new fossil plants that we'll have to pay for 40 years. Our kids will be paying for that. So I have a lot of ideas on affordability, and those are just a few, but there's a lot of work to be done here. Some of this is baked into the cake like Vogel. So it is hard work to reduce rates, but I have a lot of good ideas there.
Okay, sorry about that. So right now, Georgia has incentivized data centers to the tune of $296 million. There was a piece of legislation, Senate Bill 34, that would have put a moratorium and kind of slowed some of this down. I'm not anti-tech, I'm not anti-business. All I'm simply arguing is that if these individuals are going to come, they should pay their fair share. One of my colleagues talked about this at a meeting yesterday, that data centers are paying somewhere around 5 cents and we're paying somewhere around 21 cents. So for me, this is purely a conversation surrounding equity. Data centers pay 40% below the national average in the state of Georgia. Georgia is 13 nationally as it relates to energy costs and being burdens for working families. We already talked about the 43% in energy rates, the increase that we've already experienced. We talked about the plant Vogel runs and the 6 rate increases. For this reason, I support a tiered rate system that will support families that are struggling to make ends meet. And I'm referring to seniors, those individuals. So if we're going to give corporate welfare to data centers and businesses and corporations, we need to take care of those in Georgia that need us the most.
Thank you so much for your answers. And we'll move on to the next question, building public trust. Trust in our leadership is essential, beginning with Ms. Waits, then Mr. Hubbard, Mr. Jones, and Mr. Blackman. How will you work to build public trust in the PSC, especially considering past concerns surrounding transparency and ethics among commissioners? I will also have follow-up for you, Mr. Blackman. So while we understand what your appeal has been temporarily granted and you're continuing your campaign, many voters have expressed concern about the uncertainty surrounding your residency eligibility. How do you plan to address these concerns and maintain transparency with voters who may now feel unsure about the legitimacy and stability of your candidacy for District 3? So we will start with Ms. Waits and move to Mr. Hubbard. Thank you.
Okay, so I think the conversation is surrounding transparency. And so I want to go back to that. Currently, right now, members of the Public Service Commission are allowed to accept campaign donations and funding from the very companies and corporations that they regulate. For those of us who served in the General Assembly, this was a no-no. We were not allowed to take any campaign donations during the legislative session. So one, I would love to work with our former colleagues to ensure that this stops. You cannot regulate the folks you're going to manage and then take money from them. So that's a conflict of interest. And I think we also do this by strengthening ethics regulations, increasing public access to information, and whistleblower protections, community engagements. Mr. Blackman talks about this all the time, getting out on the road, traveling throughout the state of Georgia. Although we're elected right here in our districts, we regulate the entire state of Georgia. So we do that by getting in the car, driving or flying wherever we need to get information to the public. And lastly, independent oversight, performing an audit. How are they utilizing resources and dollars? I'm going to come back and talk about this a little bit later in terms of corporate profits for Georgia Power. Thank you.
All righty. And next we'll hear from Mr. Hubbard.
Transparency and ethics are at the core of this election. So right now, District 3 is occupied by Fitz Johnson. He has never been elected, and yet over the last 4 or 5 years, he's voted on more than $24 billion that's been added to what Georgia Power can earn profit on. He takes money, as Keisha Waits just pointed out, from the lawyers that sit across the table that argue their case for Georgia Power Company and affiliates. Many people don't know that Georgia Power Company is wholly owned by Southern Company. Southern Company owns 2.5 natural gas companies that sell the fossil gas to Georgia Power Company. There's just deep unethical behavior on this commission. And frankly speaking, right now we have a commissioner who does not follow the rules, Fitz Johnson. He has residency issues and he will not survive the November election. And that's frankly what we're facing right now with Daniel Blackman. He has residency issues and his challenge will not hold up. You can't just take pictures of a couch in a storage unit and call that a residency. He voted in Forsyth County in November. So, I respect him, but for the better good of this election, I feel that he is causing us a risk of this election being canceled once again. And I'm terribly afraid of that. And I think that the better good should prevail here.
Okay. Mr. Jones, you're next, please.
Yeah, I think I'm adding on to Ms. Waits and Mr. Hubbard's comments around transparency and really campaign contributions. For your listeners, I would encourage all of them to go to the Georgia Campaign website tomorrow, June 2nd, because all candidates must disclose their campaign contributions. We must file it. It'll be public information. And to Mr. Hubbard's point, I think when you see Fitz Johnson, the unelected person sitting there, and the contributions he's received and how many of them come from people who are close related or companies that are close related to Georgia Power, you will see that he's compromised. So while the transparency is there, the greater concern is the influence. And is he objective? And is he really looking out for our interest? And so from that standpoint, he's conflicted. He's compromised. And so from a transparency standpoint, I would say first start there. If you go to my website today, I update my campaign contribution expenditures every week. It's not very exciting, but at least it's transparent. The other thing I would focus on is really this concept of trade secrets. And Georgia Power submits a lot of information to the commission that is put under trade secrets, which then makes it non-transparent. In order to see it, you then have to sign a legal agreement, at which point, if you actually do some analysis and publish that, you can be criminally charged. And so at that point, I have not signed those NDAs, but really I would be doing much deeper scrutiny as a public person if in fact these trade secrets are not so loosely and liberally applied to basically block us from actually seeing how the utility is performing.
All righty. And Mr. Blackman, please.
I'll keep the transparency on the commission question very, very simple. We should not take any campaign contributions at all. We should regulate the process, and we should make sure that in every single instance of the regulatory practice, there in no way, shape, or form can we be compromised. Now, I'm happy to answer the question, and I definitely want to make sure that I address Mr. Hubbard's desperate attempt to try and make this an issue because of whatever status or his need to bring this up rather than standing alone as a candidate. I lived in Atlanta for 20 years. I moved to Forsyth County. There's no secret about that. I voted in the election. I happened to move back into Atlanta prior to the time, if he brings up the voting record, that I can change my vote to vote in the November election. Now, I understand why this is a concern, but the people around the state of Georgia that know me best are not in any way, shape, or form compromised by my integrity, by my intention to run, and or by their support. Again, to Mr. Hubbard's point, I appreciate everybody's qualifications and everybody's work. I have not only been at the Public Service Commission, Peter, but I've been around the state. I haven't seen you around the state. And those individuals that are from North Georgia, South Georgia, and coastal Georgia know who I am and what I stand for. We have presented facts. If we weren't able to present facts to an administrative hearing court that ultimately went to the Fulton County Superior Court, we would not in any way, shape, or form have had a chance for an appeal. I asked people to allow the process to take its place. I asked Peter to stand on your own record, stand on your own policies, and make sure that you can continue to answer those questions. But for me, I'm laser focused on this race. I'm laser focused on my qualifications. What I'm more concerned about, more than Peter's comment, more than any single concern we have, is that this challenge that was made by one of the candidates in this race actually could have been prevented. When this happened on April 17th, I welcomed and wished the Secretary of State addressed this prior to us having any ballot issues when the Public Service Commission race went to the counties and the names were certified. I wish the the Secretary of State would have given us a chance to address this prior to this. So for that reason, I do want to reassure voters, we have our day in court. It is June the 17th. The election is still on June the 17th. The hearing we have is on June 10th, And as of today, we are back on the ballot because of an injunction that was passed by a federal Fulton County Superior Court judge that gave us the opportunity to argue our case. And I look forward to my date in court.
Thank you for your clarification, Mr. Blackman.
Thank you.
I will pause here for a moment to see if there are any questions from the chat we want to highlight for our candidates. Seeing that there are no questions at this time, Ellie, you may proceed with the next question.
All right. Thank you, Nye. Let's shift a little bit to talk about clean energy. For the next three questions, we'll start with Mr. Jones, then Ms. Waits, Mr. Blackman, and then Mr. Hubbard. What is your plan to expand access to clean and renewable energy sources such as solar and wind, especially in underserved communities?
Yeah, my plan is first to look at the 2 coal-fired electricity plants remaining in the state right now, which are some of the largest in the United States. Those were originally scheduled to be phased out in 2028. Georgia Power, because of the data center demand, wants to keep those open until now 2030, maybe 2032. I'm extremely troubled by that, given the amount of carbon dioxide and emissions that coal-fired plants generate, how long they'll stay in the atmosphere. What's equally troubling to me is really what's coming out of the federal government. I'm not sure if you've caught it, but basically the state of Michigan was prepared to close its last coal-fired plant this month. The utility company wants to close it. The Public Service Commission wants to close it. And the Department of Energy came up and ordered them to keep it open and keep burning it. And the Public Service Commission thinks it's going to add $10 million to price increases. So we are just getting ridiculous, basically directives coming out of the federal government. My concern is that Georgia Power and this commission will acquiesce to that federal government, and our environment will get worse. It will get dirtier. And so we do have to take action from a public standpoint and make our voice heard, both through the commission, through the legislature, and if need be, through the streets around this is not the environment that we want in Georgia. Yes, I'm a huge proponent of solar panels on rooftops. I'm also a huge proponent of solar panels and batteries for alternative forms of energy, and for other innovators that want to bring new clean energy solutions and test them and pilot them here in Georgia. We would be welcoming to them and look to maybe work with the government to provide subsidies or incentives or tax abatements that basically makes us a more attractive place for pursuing clean energy. All of those are large policies that would make a shift in the environment that we have right now.
Thank you for the question. So Plant Vogel raised residential rates by 24%. This is a conversation piece that directly impacts Brown and Black communities. Most of us all over the state of Georgia remember when we had the biolab fire recently. So oversight certainly matters. I think the thing is that we need to move towards solar, and we do that by increasing the buyback rates. Most people don't even know that there's a program right now to assist families as it relates to taking and utilizing solar power. So we increase the buyback rate. We encourage households to invest into clean energy programs through participation. We remove some of the caps so that more homeowners are able to benefit from the program. And then we also take on things such as utility solar expansion. I'd like to see that at hospitals, libraries, public partnerships, things of that nature. So I think we do that through expanding the solar program that's currently in place, the buyback program, so that more households are able to take advantage of this resource.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. Okay. Lost my place. Okay. So, what is your plan to expand access to clean and renewable energy sources such as solar and wind, especially in underserved communities?
So the great thing about this question is almost 20 years ago, I worked with the NAACP to craft a report called Cold Blooded. It goes back as far as my community work has started across the state of Georgia, especially in rural areas where fossil fuel plants have overwhelmingly impacted communities in areas like Juliet, Georgia, right outside of Macon, in areas that coal ash and different fossil fuel industries have impacted it. Look, we fell short in 2021 of winning this Public Service Commission race, and I was honored to get a call from the president's office to be able to work on the very thing you mentioned. We have not yet put money into wind exploration off of the coast of Georgia, but solar works in Georgia. We've seen it. When we deployed capital under the Inflation Reduction Act, we were able to include solar in the expansion of the Port of Savannah. We were able to expand solar with what many people may know in Dalton with the Q-Cells facility. Brian Kemp liked to say that Georgia is the best place to do business. Well, a very significant portion of that reason is because of Democrats that passed the largest infrastructure law in the history of our country, which was the bipartisan infrastructure law, $1.2 trillion, $27 billion committed through the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. These are all programs that are important. What I will do as it relates to Georgia is push back against the bully. When Georgia Power puts forth an integrated resources plan or puts information out there, we've got to inform communities, because the people that lose and miss out are folks that live in broadband deserts and food deserts that are now going to have to deal with the fact that there's no community solar. We need to push for landowners and for landlords to include solar on their buildings so that those who are renting and don't own their homes have access to solar. That's where community solar and rooftop solar comes in. We need a commissioner that not only knows how to navigate the federal side by getting money into this state, even under an adversarial administration. We need to make sure that we are able to tap into the public sector to point to energy infrastructure around the state that doesn't compromise local communities, but builds infrastructure without false promises of jobs. And that starts from education, it starts from action, and it starts from a commissioner that understands exactly what to ask Georgia Power and the industries to advance solar and especially infrastructure projects that help to protect our most vulnerable communities. Thank you for the question.
So the question is, how, as a commissioner, can I bring more solar and wind and I'd add battery storage, and how can I have that, work to the advantage of low-income folks? It's an excellent question, because I literally have already published that plan at my website, georgia-ces.org, where I ran a model of the Georgia Power electric grid under various circumstances and show what we should be building and what we should be retiring coal plants. And it's solar and storage and wind and sharing with our neighbors. It's not building gas-fired power plants. So I already have that plan. And I would add that my expertise in developing solar and storage projects across the country, I've argued before permitting boards. I've spoken to landowners about their concerns. I've done really everything to bring these projects forward. I've successfully navigated requests for proposals, the commercial side of it. I cover everything. So I know how to bring solar and storage projects forward. And how can it benefit those who are lower income? Well, again, it's using the power and the authority as a regulator to create the tariff that allows people to tap into, of a certain income, to tap into those lower cost resources like solar. And utility is good, but utility scale solar, but it requires a lot of transmission. It takes up farmland, and rooftop is a bit more expensive. What I like is what's right in the middle, which you can tuck onto a few acres here and there, put close to load, and then you can simply, with a bill adder, you can have people tap into that resource. So there's a lot of ways that we can bring more solar, drive down costs for everyone, and allow that to be tapped by those who would benefit from it the most.
All righty. So our next question is surrounding environmental justice, and we'll have approximately 2 minutes from each candidate. And we're going to go in the same order, Jones, followed by Waits, Blackman, and Hubbard. We all know that environmental justice is critical in PSC decisions. How will you ensure that environmental justice is considered in decisions about plant locations, pipeline approvals, or utility infrastructure projects?
I'm sorry, but I need to challenge the premise of your question, because I do not believe that the Commission is giving consideration to environmental justice today in its decision making, or it's in a location. So that's a big miss. The other is, when I studied the Georgia code relating to the Public Service Commission, there is very little reference to environmental justice, to environmental considerations. And in fact, if you look at the IRP and what Georgia Power has filed, most of its reference in terms of the environment, in terms of emissions, in terms of CO2, they're basically filing that with the Department of Natural Resources. And so one of the things I will be pursuing as a commissioner is to try to work with the state legislature and influence them and say, in fact, the world of a regulatory commissioner has evolved, and we should be taking direct consideration of the environmental considerations, along with prices, along with finances, as we make a decision in terms of which technology, what sources, and what locations that are going to take place. It's not happening today, and we're seeing the results of that by the fact that it's not being explicitly considered. That's a change that I would be pursuing from a priority standpoint.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jones. Next, we'll have Ms. Waits.
Well, I think the first thing we need to do is look at an environmental impact study. And these are things that I remember working on as a member of the General Assembly, also during my time with FEMA. We've had some of the most violent storms due to climate change, although there are people who refuse to admit that it's real and that it actually exists. I think we need to take a look at the proximity in terms of where we're placing these data centers in any type of infrastructure, whether it's close to schools and hospitals. Germany is doing something that I think is phenomenal. They're utilizing parking lots to place solar panels to generate renewable energy. So there are lots of things that we can take a look at. Unfortunately, in Georgia, we have a monopoly. Georgia Power provides 50% of the power to the entire state of Georgia. And so for that reason, there is no desire or incentive to go in a different direction in terms of clean and renewable energy. I've referenced Biolab's fire multiple times because, again, there is no oversight. So it is my hope as a new member is to return the commission, or at least to Daniel Blackman's point, work as one member or two to move us toward a different direction of providing oversight, working for consumers, and becoming more environmentally friendly.
Mr. Blackman, you're next.
Yeah, so I'm really appreciative of you answering this question. I think of asking the question. I think environmental justice is something that is frowned upon. We've seen attacks from the current administration on DEI and environmental justice. As a matter of fact, I wrote the first ever federal plan on incorporating environmental justice into the federal workforce, and as of today, it has been scrubbed by the Trump administration. I actually agree with what Mr. Jones said. When you look at the purview and the code within the Public Service Commission, there is no mention of environmental justice at all. And the very little bit that you can even find from a legislative standpoint doesn't reflect any plan or comprehensive strategy in going forward. Look, not only am I an expert witness on the biolab situation that happened, I was a part of the original coordination of efforts to respond to what happened there. Environmental justice has been embedded in my career. I mentioned earlier, going all the way back to the cold-blooded report in the state of Georgia, working with not only our congressional members in Georgia, but with Congressional Black Caucus around the country. I've presented directly to the leadership within caucuses, not only in the Southeastern United States, but in the Northwest, on how environmental justice can be implemented in environmental policy. And this includes testifying to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission on the impact on Burke County, right, and North Carolina, where Duke Energy impacted the coal ash industry impacted the community, with Burke County, Georgia, and the increased rates of cancer. This is a part of my DNA. This is what I do as an individual. If I weren't on this ballot to earn your vote, I would be working right now all over this state to ensure that environmental justice was paramount. Now, here's what we have to do. Number one, we've got to not only work with the state legislative body, but federal funds come through the state through the Environmental Protection Division. Those funds go through what's called a state revolving fund. We need to not only address our state legislators, we need to work with the EPD to direct those funds and map out parts of the state that have been left behind. Again, I mentioned earlier, broadband and food deserts. We need to identify communities and areas that are being impacted. And while it is not a direct environmental justice issue, the fact that the Public Service Commission is using eminent domain to take the land of a Black family that has had their land since Reconstruction is an absolute problem. It is an atrocity. And even worse, the candidates that are on this year's ballot are taking money from the railroad company that is taking this land. So when we think of environmental justice, we have to think of the social impact of our most vulnerable communities. I have a track record in doing it. Environmental justice is something I believe every candidate in this race believes in. My track record shows that I've done something about it. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we'll hear from Mr. Hubbard.
Yeah, environmental justice in the context of our energy plan in Georgia is incredibly important. After all, again, Public Service Commissioner, it's right there in the title. You're there to serve the public. And what do you have if you don't have your health? So it's deeply important. And here's the two things that I think are most important for environmental justice in Georgia. One is clearly we need to move off fossil gas, fossil coal. That is dumping insane amounts of carbon dioxide into our atmosphere, and we get Hurricane Helene's. And so we're paying the cost in multiple ways, but we're paying for it in hidden health costs as well. When we burn natural gas, there's particulate matter 2.5, and that gets into your lungs and it causes asthma. As a public service announcement, if you have a gas oven in your house and you turn that on, you're releasing those combustibles and your children are breathing it in. We shouldn't be burning gas. And so my plan to move us towards clean energy as quickly as possible is one of the best ways we can serve environmental justice in Georgia. But the second is, if your bills are going up, you don't have the means to take care of your health in other ways. You can't pay for your doctor bills and other things. So we have to put downward pressure on power bills as well, so that people, are freed up to be able to spend money on their health and other ways to take care of themselves. So clean energy transition as quickly as possible and driving down bills, that is, I think, the best way to serve environmental justice in Georgia.
Right. Thank you. Now, the next question is question 7, and then I think we'll take a question from the public after this. Now, let's talk about public engagement, equity, and access. How do you, each candidate, plan to involve the public, especially marginalized and rural communities, in PSC decisions that directly affect their energy costs and services? And we'll start with Mr. Jones.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, right now, the only way you can really find out what's going on at the commission is to go to their website. So something very practical would be to essentially take that link and start linking it to as many other community sites that are out there, especially when there are big issues that are going on there. Quite frankly, most of the issues that go on from a commission standpoint, people would have no interest in. But the big ones in terms of rate cases, in terms of integrated resource plans, in terms of policy or strategy or rulemaking, we should make a great effort in terms of outreach, in terms of notifications, using all the social media platforms, and give people the ability to engage and have their voice heard without having to be physically present in the meeting at the Public Service Commission. That means using tools such as this, okay? Letting people sign up. I know what the issue is. I want my 3 minutes. Let them actually face the commission. Because if you actually watch commission meetings, quite a few of them are on video calls. They're not sitting in the room. Even though some of them are the local District 3 commissioner who should be having the shortest distance to the commission, video in for a lot of those meetings there. So if it's good enough for the commission, it should be good enough for the public. Let's take this technology and open it up and let people get access to these discussions.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Waits?
Thank you for the question. Making the PSC much more accessible to the public. The PSC operates oftentimes in secret because most people don't understand the function or how it directly relates to their everyday lives. This is something that I think that I have a significant amount of experience in. During my tenure in the Georgia General Assembly, I often did podcasts. I was constantly utilizing the gift of the media to inform individuals when we were making decisions. If you recall, guns everywhere in the state of Georgia, I led the fight against that type of harmful legislation. Most recently, as a member of the Atlanta City Council, when we were dealing with significant violence, I led the fight for a curfew. So again, engaging the community is not something that I'm a stranger to. Holding town hall meetings, utilizing our social media and public access to get information to individuals, but also taking advantage of utility bills, sharing information regarding meetings. And to my colleague's point, as he said, making the meetings much more accessible, being able to put those on YouTube, putting those on Facebook, advertising it so people know what's going on. I am confident that many more people would show up if they knew that public comment was something that they could access. Leave a recording on a voicemail or leave a video in terms of what their thoughts and feelings were. As a member of the Atlanta City Council, we had 17 hours surrounding the public safety debate. And that's the type of robust engagement that I've always encouraged and I've always supported. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think next we have Mr. Hubbard.
Great. So yeah, the question is about how to access those folks who are basically least served. One of the segments of Georgia that I think is least served are the, every year it's close to 250,000 households, almost 250,000 households. So there's several people in each household whose electricity bill is cut off at some point during the year by Georgia Power due to arrearages for not being able to make payments. And that can happen with just one missed payment in the very next month. And so a lot of those folks just, they're sort of gobsmacked by that. So I want to, as a commissioner, serve those folks and drive down that number as close to zero as possible. With the record profits, Georgia Power should not be disconnecting people and then charging an exorbitant fee to flip a switch and turn it back on. But there's other things as well. So there's literally 50 different tariffs. There's only a few for residential customers. But if you know what you're doing and you can advise folks, you can do things like, again, if you have access to, it will take some ability to do this. But, if you can shift some of your energy usage to, say, the evenings, there are ways to reduce your bills and work within sort of the existing system. But we have to do a whole lot more to educate people, get the word out. And so with the extensive travel budget that the commissioners currently use to basically, fill their Rolodex and get campaign donations from the companies they regulate, obviously, I'll be on the road talking to the people that I'm serving as a public service commissioner. I'm not there to serve the corporations. I'm there to serve the public, and I'll be interfacing with them as much as possible, traveling around the state.
All righty.
I respect what everyone has put out there. but as a former federal regulator, I understand an issue not only with accessibility that has not been mentioned during this forum, and that is our disability community. We have overwhelmingly understand that marginalized communities are impacted. As a matter of fact, during COVID, more individuals that were struggling with diabetes that had their power cut off by Georgia Power could not cool their insulin. We need to make sure that medical waivers are advanced throughout this process. But here's the fact: 50% of individuals with disabilities have been overwhelmingly impacted by a lack of ability to get reduced or forgiven basic household necessities, such as lower utility rates. 38%, if I'm not mistaken, of these same communities were unable to pay a bill. And this is our disabilities. These are individuals that are not just forcing financial challenges, but individuals that are struggling each and every day. And the challenge is that many people with disabilities, while they only make up 4% of the energy workforce, they are almost 92% of those impacted on energy burden. So we have to understand that this goes far beyond a crisis of accessibility. It deals directly with public health. And what we need to do, and I agree, when you look at making the Public Service Commission more accessible, we got to take into consideration many areas in rural Georgia have still been left behind because they have no broadband. So even the act of accessibility to get on the internet, if I'm a kid in rural Georgia and my mom has to drive me to McDonald's or Wendy's to use the internet in the parking lot, I don't have the ability to get on these meetings. We got to get out of these offices. We got to go into these communities. I have said this from the first day I started campaigning. We are going to have the most impactful and the most consistent amount of miles we put on a vehicle to make sure that we get to the 159 counties in Georgia. No matter if I am serving in the metro Atlanta region, South Georgia needs us. Coastal Georgia needs us. I was just in North Georgia yesterday working with communities that are focusing on congressional races because they can't get federal money for broadband. We've got to take this position seriously. We've got to make sure that when we're talking about the inclusionary aspect of this work, we can no longer speak over people's head. This is a very complicated position. For us, we have to make sure that we are doing the very simple things that help people, which is getting into their communities and inviting the other 4 commissioners, once I'm elected, to go into these communities and to have a chance, similar to them being invited to forums. They may not say yes, but we need to start holding town halls in local schools, local communities, and senior citizen facilities. We got to take the Public Service Commission from 244 Washington Street to the senior homes in Southwest Atlanta and the communities in DeKalb County and the schools where kids that are on free and reduced lunch are getting their programs cut by the federal administration. I believe I'm the person to be able to take care of that, and it's very important for me, and thank you for the question.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, as we move into discussing more on energy, Mr. Hubbard will lead, followed by Mr. Blackman, Ms. Waits, and Mr. Jones. Mr. Hubbard, what specific policies or programs would you support to eliminate energy burdens that disproportionately affect Black, Brown, and rural Georgians?
Yeah, it's really a great question because, as we know, you'll hear from the commissioners that we have low rates, but what counts is your bill, and we have a tremendous energy burden, and we're one of the most burdened states in the nation with respect to that. So specifically what I could do is, again, I think that our problems are systemic. And so that's why we need someone who understands that you have to start with the plan that Georgia Power puts out there. Are we going to build fossil plants, or are we going to build lower cost clean energy? When we build that lower cost clean energy, that's how we lower power prices for everyone. But specifically for those who are the most burdened, again, as a constitutional officer of the state, I can propose new tariffs, new plans, new things that have to be evaluated. I'll have to convince my fellow commissioners to join with me in those efforts to carve out lower rates for those who are the most burdened by these rising energy costs. But I think I can do that because, one, this is what's best for their constituents, and I can point that out with the rigorous analysis. And again, I will make that case to their constituents personally. I will go to their districts and say, this is why you need to put pressure on that regulator, on that commissioner, to support my plan for more clean energy, to put that lower pressure, to lower pressure on power rates. So specifically for those groups that are feeling that burden the most. So Again, there is tremendous authority instilled in commissioners, and I intend to use it to affect those who have been the most affected by these egregious power bills that are skyrocketing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry about that. So I think number one, we've got to go back to the Obama era and look at what President Obama did with the tax rebate plan to help weatherize communities across this country, including in rural areas and predominantly Black and brown communities. Many of the homes in rural Georgia and coastal Georgia, including areas throughout the metro Atlanta region, these homes were built in the late 80s and early 90s. These homes aren't weatherized. So out of the gate, we've got to understand that one of the biggest challenges that we have are the infrastructures that are in place or the lack thereof. We've got to make sure that we address this issue, because while Georgia, 31% of our population are Black folks, okay? And that is out of 31%, that's about 3.3 million people in the state of Georgia that are Black. Yet and still, Black people in the state of Georgia are 76% of the disconnections. That is an atrocious rate, but that is not foreign. That happens all over the country because energy burden impacts Black and brown communities overwhelmingly and disproportionately more than any other areas. So what we need to do is we need to focus on making sure that these policies that come from the Public Service Commission are not just hyper-focused on quote unquote DEI or being woke. We need to make sure that they understand that energy burden in our most vulnerable communities is going to have a long-term and disproportionate impact on the financial viability of these communities. It is projected that by 2051, the wealth combined in the United States of Black families will be zero. It's literally zero. You can go look up U.S. World Report. You can look up all kind of information. This goes far beyond energy burden and Public Service Commission decisions. This is scary because families in rural Georgia do not have the economic opportunities that we have in Metro Atlanta. And if you read a recent report, there are two companies that own 38,000 homes in the Metro Atlanta region. We've got to make decisions that are putting these communities first. We need to go and rethink. We can't change what happened with Plant Vogtle. What we can do is when these data centers come up, we need to make sure that there are community benefit agreements in place. When you have communities across the board that are being impacted by fossil fuel burning companies, by data centers, by any industry, we need to take models that have worked. I regulated the data centers and the cryptocurrency and data mining in the United States and through the state of Kentucky. We need to address those issues, and we need to do it by being bold and courageous at the Public Service Commission. That's what I plan to do.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi. Can you cue the question one more time?
Sure. Hold on one second.
Assisting families that are burdened in rural communities?
That's correct.
Okay. So I think we do that through these cost benefit agreements. And again, I have some history of doing those on the Atlanta City Council, as well as being a member of the Georgia General Assembly. Here's how we do that. When you have a data center that's going to come, and let's just kind of give you an idea of what we're discussing. A data center uses the equivalent of a small community in terms of 1 day usage of consumption for energy, as well as water. Power and water. So that's the amount of energy we're talking about. So we do that through cost benefit agreements, meaning if you come to Douglasville in Jackson County, which is where these facilities are moving to because of the low cost in land, the regulations in terms of permitting, things of that nature is easier to navigate. So that's one of the reasons they're coming there. And so you do that through cost benefit agreements. If you come to these facilities, make sure that there is a benefit to the community. We can put solar panels on hospitals. We can put solar panels on schools and libraries, things of that nature. And also ensure that they're green, utilizing renewable energy such as recycled wastewater, solar panels on top of the building. Some of these facilities are the size of a football field. So there's a way to do this where it actually benefits us and it can work.
Thank you.
So you framed your question in terms of race and ethnicity, in terms of brown and Black communities. Quite frankly, I do not foresee a day when we will be doing pricing design based on race or ethnicity. However, I would be a very strong proponent of doing pricing design based on income distribution. And so if you look at the fact that today, I think Peter mentioned there's like 40 different tariffs. We have residential, we have small, medium business, we have large business. There is nothing to say we can't now click down and talk about income distribution pricing and geographic specific pricing. Because if you've worked in regulation, if you've done price setting and regulation, I'm going to give you some insight. It's all artificial, okay? Because in fact, you have a generating plant that serves all of these different constituents, there's a cost allocation process. And you can move those costs over these different categories in a way that you feel is good social policy that reduces energy burden on low-income communities and rural areas if you have that as an explicit objective. And I think we should have that as an explicit objective. Right now, the objectives that are defined in the code for a public service commissioner is to focus on affordable pricing, reliable energy. And that's about it. We can be much more specific, much more targeted, much more deliberate through the rate setting process and understanding costs and how those are distributed. However, this commission walked away from that opportunity by saying, we'll take a look at it 3 years from now. So now it will be 6 years before we have an opportunity to be more thoughtful in terms of addressing the fact that energy is a utility, which means it needs to be available and affordable to everyone.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jones.
Is that me? No?
Yes, Ellie,
Yeah.
it's-
Okay. Sorry about that, guys. Okay. All right. So next question is, do you support moratoriums on utility disconnections during extreme weather or economic downturn? And step 2 for that is, how are you ensure Georgia's energy infrastructure is resilient in the face of increasing climate-related disasters such as extreme heat or floods or hurricanes and things like that?
Are you starting with me again?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Okay. So sorry, I just remembered the second part of the question about climate and resiliency. What was the first part of the question?
Do you support moratoriums on utility disconnections during extreme weather or economic downturn? Yeah.
I support a moratorium on utility disconnections entirely. Certainly the threshold should be more than 1 or 2 missed months, specifically when power bills are skyrocketing. But also certainly it's a matter of public health to disconnect someone from their electricity. So the food spoils in the refrigerator, so their medicine goes bad in the refrigerator, so their oxygen supply, that equipment, you have to have power. It's simply unethical to turn off people's power at any point, frankly, but specifically during periods of high impact climate events and extreme heat. And we're only going to see more of that. The fossil fuels that we keep putting out through our power grid is only exacerbating these public health challenges, specifically around heat and big hurricanes. With respect to climate resiliency, there's a lot of ways to harden our grid. We're using our grid, first of all, only about 47% of that total capacity. There's a whole lot of extra headroom that we could be using, but we can do things like the community solar that I mentioned, where we can put solar in small locations here, there, and everywhere, and then back it up with battery storage. Those types of projects that are micro-targeted for communities, you can add in those climate resiliency benefits, and then even have a microgrid that can provide power. God forbid that you should lose your power or it's cut off by Georgia Power Company, but you have a community hub where you can go to charge your phone, take your medicines, what have you. So there are lots of good ideas there's a train coming at us, and it is climate change, and we have to face that reality, but we can mitigate some of those impacts with smart policy.
So this is a really heartfelt challenge that we're facing. Look, the last time this happened at a large scale in the state of Georgia was when 132,000 Georgia Power customers faced the end of a moratorium that was ended subsequently by the Public Service Commission during the COVID pandemic. So we've seen this, right? I know the question was phrased from a standpoint of extreme weather events, which I'll touch on, but we've already seen this. And we've seen that in the middle, right, the Public Service Commission has already failed, right? In the middle of our pandemic, when people were still trying to get jobs, when people were still trying to make sure their insulin was cool, when senior citizens on a fixed income were struggling because LIHEAP, the low income heat and energy assistance program, was cut to be able to get that assistance there. Our 5-member commission unanimously voted to cut the moratorium less than 6 months into the pandemic. I know people in Georgia right now in counties like Dougherty and in coastal Georgia areas like Liberty County that are still recovering and have not been able to make ends meet because those jobs, some of which never came back. Now, if you look at what happened in Texas in 2021, I don't ever want that to happen in Georgia. We had a snowstorm that hit Texas. It completely dismantled their grid. And while citizens in Texas were struggling, Ted Cruz, who's their U.S. Senator, was on the beach. And we don't want to see that in Georgia. We want a strong and resilient grids. We know that we're getting hotter summers. We know our winters are getting colder. And it does us no benefit that the current administration, as of February the 28th of this year, has cut and has frozen the low income heat and energy assistance program. So for me, we need to make sure that, number one, I absolutely will support a moratorium. And I agree with a few of the answers previously. I think we need to not only think about 1 or 2, extensions, we need to be able to extend moratoriums and medical waivers simultaneously to ensure that folks that need energy the most are having access. Working moms in Georgia that are making the state minimum wage, which is $5.15 an hour, these women, many of which have small children, can't afford to go 2 or 3 days without their power. And we need to be more compassionate in our leadership. If Georgia Power can make record profits and their shareholders have no skin in the game, then the Public Service Commission, it is incumbent upon them to protect working families. And here's another area we haven't spoken about. Labor. Extreme weather events has now, as of 2022, have had an increase of, I think, 20% of heat-related death by our labor workers, those who work in our labor councils around the country. Labor members are dying around the country because of extreme weather events. We've got to protect our workers. We've got to protect our families. Moratoriums matter. I support them. And more than that, we need ideas that's going to help strengthen those most vulnerable areas, which are the medical challenged and the seniors. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're going to stick to our 2-minute time limit so we can get through the event tonight. So I'll definitely be timing. So when you hear the beep, please, end your statement quickly so we can move on to the next candidate. Thank you.
So I want to start by emphasizing it's important to follow the rules. So I think that's the first thing we need to focus on tonight. But to your point, Mr. Blackman talked about the fact that there were moratoriums during COVID, which were absolutely a necessity. During many storms, you will see these in terms of relief for your mortgage or for other things. The reality is that Georgia Power has made record profits. We don't have a problem with utility companies making profits. We all know that. But we also have to balance the needs of businesses as well as consumers. And so for this reason, I support a tiered rate system. And this tiered rate system helps seniors and working families who may be struggling and having a hard time. We do this through cost-benefit community agreements, stipulated agreements, so that when we do have these challenges to come online, and I love the idea of a medical waiver. I think that's exactly the direction we need to be moving in. But this is why we have to change the composition of the Public Service Commission. We have not had a Consumer Public Service Commission because we know that they have been advocates for utility companies, power and energy companies. And then the last piece is that I am not anti-business. I am not anti-tech. But Georgia Power has made record profits off the backs of Georgia consumers. And so we have to put policy and legislation in place to ensure that we are moving in the right direction as it relates to those who need us the most. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the question you asked was very narrow, which was a moratorium on disconnections during extreme events. And I do support a moratorium on disconnections for extreme events. The question now becomes, how long is the moratorium relative to the extreme event? And that's got to be reasonably assessed there. I probably haven't received any endorsements because I have a problem whenever somebody asks me an absolute question. So I will not support a moratorium on ever doing a disconnect. And part of that is because when I worked for the telecommunications company, I ran our collections arm for a couple of years. And I can tell you, all of our engagements with customers, each one was unique and specific, and you try to figure out what their situation is, what plan is available, and how can you accommodate it to the last step you want to do as a disconnect. That's the worst case. I don't know what the process Georgia Power goes through today in terms of working with customers, assessing their situation, looking for alternative payment plans before going on and issuing a disconnect. I hope it's just not the fact that you're 7 days late on your bill until the power is turned off. There should be some outreach. There should be multiple efforts going on to try to accommodate that. But at the outcome, there are a large number of disconnects that are going on. You certainly don't want those happening in August when it's hottest. At the same time, I have direct experience, and I know this won't sound well and people want to hear it. I know when I'm being gamed, okay? I know when basically a new name goes in the same address that was different, got disconnected 2 months ago. And some of that may be going on, I don't know, but I don't do an absolute prevention of disconnects. The number's high, it needs to be investigated, I need to understand the process, and so there's my answer.
Thank you.
All right. We're coming towards the end here. Thank you for everybody sticking with us. So I'm going to kind of consolidate for the sake of time, and we want to get to the chat questions. So we want to talk towards internet access. So what is your plan to expand high-speed internet to rural Georgia communities? And how do you see the PSC's role in breaking up the monopolies and ensuring competitive pricing and quality service? So that's kind of a two-part question, but we'll start with Ms. Waits, then go to Mr. Hubbard, Mr. Jones, and Mr. Blackman.
Great question. So certainly deregulation did not serve fellow Georgians. And we've seen that now in the example of Georgia Power. We all know that competition matters. And so I'm not necessarily sure that coming onto the commission will allow us to deregulate Georgia as it relates to getting rid of monopolies. But I think what we can do is utilize our partners and friends over in the General Assembly to put measures in place to ensure, one, that members of the PSC are no longer taking campaign contributions and dollars from the folks that they regulate. So we do that. Then we open it up to transparency. We talk about audits, how we're spending fellow dollars. We utilize a tiered rate system to ensure that those that are the most vulnerable are not impacted negatively by the decisions that are being made. And then finally, we change the composition of the PSC. We work with members who are sincere about consumer advocacy and ensuring that families are protected from these harmful rates and increases that we've seen in the last few years.
So how do we get more access to broadband out, especially in the rural areas, and how do we pay for it? So it's a great question. I grew up just north of Atlanta, right outside of Chattanooga, Tennessee, and Chattanooga is well known as having the fastest internet in the country. And they did that by installing smart meters for their electric utility power bills, which we all have. And then they paired it with access. They wanted to be able to see that data and have access to it. And so they did a rollout of both electric smart meters and the access to the internet, the broadband in that sense. And so, it's been a real economic driver for that city. And we could do something similar like that here. Most households already have a smart meter. We're just not using that data. We paid for it. And this is one of the many sneaky ways that Georgia Power Company has increased our rates. They asked to roll out these smart meters that could help with internet access, but it wasn't paired in that way. The forethought wasn't there. So to do a true rollout of broadband, it does take resources that has to come from somewhere. So I'd have to work with the state legislature and also look for federal funding as well to bring some of those resources. Certainly data centers that are focused on access to the internet, they should be helping to fund some of that access to, we're going to have these data centers and they need to be good neighbors. We need to have those benefits flow down to the community and have that access to internet roll out through them as well. So leave it there.
Yeah, I spent the better part of my career working on this issue. When I worked in telecommunications, I had 7 states. In many locations, I had more cows than people. And so there is, in fact, a cost of service to deliver fiber or wireline services out to remote areas. In many cases, it's just cost prohibitive. There's not enough people there that would attract a business to go ahead, even with subsidies, to go ahead and put in the physical infrastructure. So from that standpoint, you're probably locked out of having a physical hardline connection for high-speed internet. The next option then is to look over the air. And so essentially, what's the wireless solution in terms of, putting basically wireless towers, and what's the coverage area associated with those? You probably recall some of the old Verizon commercials that showed the red and the green, or the red and the blue, as far as where their coverage areas are. We need a map of all of Georgia to show which areas are red and which areas are blue, so we know where the gaps are. And then the last solution is, I talked about, wireline, and then we've got over the air, and now it's through the air. So essentially, what are you going to do from satellite? Each of those has a step down in terms of high-speed internet services. Ideally, you want fiber. Wireless is going to be slower. Satellite's going to be slower than that. All of it's going to be better than dial-up. But those really are the current physical options in terms of making broadband services available in the most remotest areas right now. That's where the technology is. And so we have to look at what is going to be the solution into those markets at a price point that, in fact, the companies that are delivering them can get a reasonable return on them.
Hey.
Mr. Blackman? Yeah, there you go. Did you get a chance to? Okay.
Yeah, I didn't see my screen pop up. I agree with two of the comments that was made. I think what Mr. Jones just said about infrastructure is really critical. I mean, if you think about what Google did a couple of years ago with Google Fiber, I mean, there were certain rural areas that didn't have the capacity for that kind of expansion. While I think all of us would love to be able to, flip a switch and help broadband expand it throughout the state, there has not been a lot of capacity or engagement around doing that. So this is more of a question with not only the legislative body, but in my former capacity as a regional administrator, I worked with both U.S. Senators John Ossoff and U.S. Senator Raphael Warnock on getting $8.6 million into rural Georgia through a federal grant that was a combination of the Department of Interior and the Department of Agriculture. We've done it. We know federal funding is there. However, this is, again, a very adversarial administration that does not believe in environmental justice. It doesn't believe in expanding broadband because they're so fixated in their own individualistic processes. Another comment that was made was around smart meters. Look, I've worked with the Tennessee Valley Authority. I've worked throughout the state. We've advocated for it. We haven't always been successful, but the smart meter technology that was mentioned earlier, that is an absolute. We don't tap into the resources we have. We've got to do a better job. And I'll leave my answer right there.
All right, thank you all for that. We have wrapped up the Q&A portion. Now I'm going to move to the chat. I know we're coming close on time, so Mr. Blackman, while I have you in the hot seat, this one is for you. If people vote for you, and this is from Tiger, if people vote for you and you don't win the appeal, who will the votes go to? And honestly, how confident are you that you'll win the appeal?
I feel very confident in what our team has put forth. And my background, everything we've done has been not only by the book, but we're committed to it. And for those, the first part of this question was, how do I feel about the appeal? I'm confident in it. If who the votes will go to, there's no way to figure out where votes will go. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and make up an answer. What I do believe is that this is potentially going towards a runoff, which means that there will likely be 2 candidates that will be on the ballot again. So for those who are concerned, continue to vote and support. I appreciate the hundreds of individuals that have reached out to us to tell us that they're going to vote in the coming days or wait till after June 10th. We respect every voter. I do not believe in voter disenfranchisement, and we will work to continue to excite the base, motivate the base, and work on the educational standpoint. But I will tell you right here and right now on this recorded line that I believe that we have an extraordinarily strong case, and we're going to do everything in our power to make sure we remain on the ballot.
Thank you for that. And again, from the same member, Tiger, I'm going to kind of consolidate this into one question. So this is for all candidates. Will you strongly advocate to get the name of the position changed to utility manager or something easier to understand what the job is for the general public? And if so, how would you get it changed? And then do you believe the office should be a 4-year versus a 6-year term? The floor is open to whoever wants to. There you go.
So I think it's important, and I'll be as quick as possible, to remember that most of the members that currently serve on the Public Service Commission were never elected. They were appointed. Yes, I love the idea of changing the name in terms of scope of service and what we actually do, because it is, in fact, was intended to be a consumer organization. So I think that's important. And I think working with members of the General Assembly to do that will be the goal that we need to reach. And I think we do that by securing these 2 seats in the November election coming up.
Yeah, I would say that I agree. I mean, to call the Public Utility Commissioner, and then look, we have a gentleman on this call that worked with the California Public Utility Commission. There are certain states that call it Utility Commission. There are other states that call it Public Service Commission. It is confusing by design. I mean, let's just put it where it is. I mean, the Public Service Commission started off as a railroad commission. I believe that we should absolutely advocate for the name, lessen confusion, but we also need to make sure that in the process, we're supporting legislators like, surprisingly, the Republicans that reintroduced legislation this year to reinstate the Consumer Utility Council, which is a watchdog agency within the state government that can be used to look over the hearings that are submitted by the administrative staff of the Public Service Commission on behalf of ratepayers.
Yeah, I want to pick up on Mr. Blackman's comment. The Consumer Utility Council is critical. So it's an organization that is meant to be a watchdog over the regulators, but it was defunded 15 plus years ago in advance of the Vogel fiasco. And so it exists, but it has zero funding. And so that Consumer Utility Council, which is related to the question, it truly is there to serve the public. As far as changing the name, there was a bill as well in this legislative session to change the name from PSC to Public Utility Commission so that it would be easier to understand. But I've been in front of them for 6 years, and it's incredibly. It just takes a lifetime to understand this stuff, and you just have to be in it. I'm all for ways to simplify and get out the message of what this commission does and how vitally important it is.
So I've been doing a lot of what I call street campaigning for the last 8 weeks. Generally, I have about 1 minute per person. I spend the first 30 seconds explaining exactly what is the Public Service Commission. If I let them guess, they might think it's garbage. They might think it's water. If you say utility, at least it gets down to telephone or energy. So if we really want the public to be engaged and have an understanding and appreciation for what's going on here, it's a simple change. So the question now is, why are we so hung up on it staying a Public Service Commission when nobody understands what that is? If you could provide clarity and transparency by Public Utilities Commission. There must be a reason why about that. And I think that needs to be challenged and explored there.
Thank you all for that question. I have one more question from the chat from Mary Robinson. And she asks exactly, what do these data centers do?
I'm happy to answer that. I used a little bit of that data center compute power to run my analysis of the Georgia Power Company's power plan, and I published that to my website. So I used it in a beneficial way. But a lot of these, there's a small amount, but a non-negligible amount of cryptocurrency here in Georgia, and they're getting sweetheart deals. I was the one who made the comment about 5 cents per kilowatt hour for a data center versus 21 cents a kilowatt hour that you and I pay for our power. It's the exact same power, but there's that much of a differential. Those data centers do have benefit. They bring revenue, as long as the governor doesn't abate the taxes too much, they bring revenue into the community, both through sales and use tax when they're being built, and then also over the long term through property taxes, again, as long as they're not abated too much. But what they do specifically is, if you've ever used ChatGPT or anything like that, I think their beneficial use is things like looking for novel solutions for drugs, for doing other things that help advance the economy, and not for taking over and creating our artistic things. So there are beneficial uses to them, and there's also drawbacks. It's like any technology, and we have to be smart about how we use them.
Yeah, I would just share with you, I mean, I was 8 years at Microsoft, and so a lot of it really was moving applications into the data center. We like to think about it as every business, every organization is a software company. So this call we're having right now is coming through a data center. The fact that we've got multiple people sharing through a cloud, having these type of engagements there. What's happened here in Georgia is the incentives that have been put in place to basically bring all these data centers now into our state. People need to understand these are not just to serve Georgia. These data centers that are coming here are going to be serving Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida. We are the regional home for data centers now. However, we're going to be burdened with the cost and the energy delivery of powering those, even though the benefits are going to be distributed across the region there. That needs to be explicitly factored in terms of how we think about pricing and charging for these data centers. Since we're going to be incurring the cost, but the benefits go other places, we got to make sure maybe we use some benefits now to lower residential energy prices as a result of all of these data centers that are going on there. The big explosion is really artificial intelligence right now. The computing power to drive AI is magnitudes higher than traditional cost services. And so the question is, what are the benefits and the value we're going to get out of AI from a society standpoint as we go forward here? We're about to basically almost increase the electricity generating capacity in this state by 50%. Georgia Power wants to do it through fossil. We want to do it through clean. But we're at a really critical point right now in terms of how the next decade of Georgia's energy and environment looks solely because of data centers.
Thank you.
So I'll answer this really, really quick because it was stated, look, data centers store and they process and distribute data. To quantify this, ChatGPT on average nationally is about $700,000 per day. I mean, this is a quantifiably, and these numbers can change, but when you look at these data centers storing this amount of information, what we have to be most concerned about to the question is how individuals are really struggling. I mean, folks in Fayette County, Georgia, right now, their water is impacted, their environment is impacted, their rates are going to be impacted, and they've been sold a false bill that is going to bring more jobs. Data centers have to be regulated the right way. I said it earlier with Kentucky. This is a part of what I regulated and implemented, but we need to make sure that folks understand the workings of it because many of our children and grandchildren are on ChatGPT, Snapchat, Facebook, and Instagram. So it's very important to store data, but to regulate it as well.
All righty. Well, thank you to each of our candidates for your thoughtful responses. We'll now move into closing statements. Each candidate will have 2 minutes each. Mr. Blackman, you may begin, followed by Ms. Waits, then Mr. Jones, and then Mr. Hubbard.
I want to thank the Georgia chapter of the Sierra Club, who I was the chair of, and let me make sure I'm looking at the time because I don't want to go over. I want to make sure that I thank the Georgia chapter of the Sierra Club, the Working Families Party, Georgia Conservation Voters, organizations that have put their trust and faith in me, individuals that have seen me do this work since 2005 across the state of Georgia. This is not something that I take lightly. To every question that was about any challenge or any discrepancy in this vote or disenfranchisement, I hear it. I even hear the passion from the candidates on this call that are concerned, but I'm here and I'm in this race to stay. I'm going to work. I'm going to fight. If I weren't on the ballot, I would be advocating for education around this state because I've been doing it for over a decade. This race is important. This is the first race in the history of the state of Georgia, the Public Service Commission in 1992, that was flipped by a Republican. If we flip this seat, this puts us in place to strengthen our ability at the Public Service Commission, but also to help Democrats get elected next year. We have the momentum. We have a qualified group of individuals that can work to make the right decision. Please consider every aspect of my background federally, locally, statewide, the passion I have for this state, the understanding I have for this state. On June 17th, I hope I earn your vote. Daniel Blackman for Public Service Commission District 3. Thank you.
Thank you again for all of those who hosted us tonight, and for all of you who took the time to join us on a Sunday evening. As quickly as possible, I've spent 3 terms in the Georgia House of Representatives representing Georgians, specifically in DeKalb, Clayton, and Fulton County. I recently have spent time on the Atlanta City Council tackling issues that local communities care about. We currently have a White House that has usurped Congress, that has usurped the Supreme Court. I believe following the rules matter. I believe integrity matters. Representation matters. We have a PSC right now that currently is governed by utility companies and those around. We need to get them money out of the pockets of those who regulate these services. I look forward to serving. My name is Keisha Waits, and I thank you for the opportunity to have this important dialogue tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Georgia is one of 10 states that actually politically elects its commissioners. I'll tell you, I've tried to influence this commission from the outside. The only reason I entered this race is because, in fact, I've been unsuccessful in trying to move the commission in a way that I felt was better representative of the public and less cozy with the basically utility company. And so I'm seeking this position to actually offer my service, my value, my experience, and having been a state regulator, having worked in a utility, understanding data centers, to be of service to all of you. Okay. If there was an easier path to get there through an appointment process, I would have much rather preferred that. I don't harbor any political aspirations. There's no other role I'm going to seek other than trying to get on the Public Service Commission. It's just that I think I have value to offer that's going to benefit all of you. But it comes down to you as the voter right now. And I have tremendous respect for the decision you're going to make. You've got 4 viable candidates here. You got to make a tough choice. You only get one vote. You can't split us apart. I'll tell you this, though. Georgia Power, Southern Company, they're institutional investors. I am the last person they want to see on the commission. Why? Because I know their business. I know their thinking. I know how they look at how they try to position their opportunity to raise prices and raise profits, because I've done it myself. Now, I've told you I've got this corny statement on my website, somebody from the inside that's working on your side. And so it comes down to you for the voter right now. If you are really deeply interested in the Public Service Commission, that you're going to spend as much time as I have in terms of learning this aspect of the business, how to manipulate it, or if you want somebody you know you'll have confidence in there that's going to take care of you, I'll ask for your vote. Okay, I won't take the money. I'm doing this as a service, as an opportunity to really improve the delivery of utility services for Georgians. I enjoy this state. I've lived here 9 years. This is my opportunity to contribute back to you as society. I hope you give me that opportunity with your vote. Thank you.
And I'd like to begin by just thanking our host, Gwinnett, NAACP. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity. As we mentioned, this is a seat that not many people are aware of. A lot of folks I talk to aren't even aware there's an election going on right now. And so, this is a critically important one. And what I want to stress to you is that, I think that, especially speaking for myself, I'm here because I want to leave this state a better place than I found it when I moved here 10 years ago. I have a 3-year-old and I have a 9-year-old, and I see the harm that is being imposed upon folks of all stripes, both financially and through the climate process. And so we have to change the paradigm. We have to change the system of regulators who are serving corporate interests and not the public. And that's what I intend to do. And I've been doing this work. You have to know the system and the tricks that Georgia Power Company uses to manipulate this whole process. And so, I've done this work for 6 years now, since 2019. That's the entire full term of a commissioner. And I understand what they do to manipulate the system. So I think truly this position needs someone who has been doing this job already for a full term of a commissioner, and who has this passion and expertise and wants to bring it to bear and harness it for your benefit. So I hope that you vote for me, Peter Hubbard, on June 17th, or as soon as you can. Thank you.
Well, this concludes tonight's virtual forum for Georgia PSC District 3. Thank you again to our candidates for your time, and to our audience for showing up to stay informed and engaged in this statewide election. Please be sure to get out to the polls and vote. This election affects all of us statewide. You may learn more about early voting, election dates, and locations at www.mvp.sos.ga.gov. Please also visit our website for upcoming events for Juneteenth, and then also for our unit banquet. Thank you again, and have a good night. Our Freedom Fund banquet on September 20th. Thank you.
Thank you all.